Hi, everyone. Welcome to, well, the secrets of my success. And there's a few more successful people that I've come across in the last, well, I've known him for about 20 years, but certainly in the last year, sort of astronomical rise in success. But as they say, my overnight success took a lifetime to achieve. I've got Jay Patel, CEO of IMImobile, who, I'll give you a bit of background, London Stock Exchange listed. So there's an exception already. He's an exception in the sense of CEO of a London Stock Exchange listed company. Then got taken over, and the deal just closed by Cisco for, I think, and Jay, you will correct me if I'm wrong, about £700 million. I'm sure it's all in the public domain.
$750, yeah.
Right, there you go. So we're talking what, three quarters of a billion, yeah. Serious money. And we'll talk about what the company does. Now, we've known each other from the Thai days, the Indus Entrepreneurs, where we mentored entrepreneurs. So, Jay, let's catch up on all that. How did you go from that? Because I know you were in venture capital as well, at New Media Spark, or Spark, as it became. Then you became CEO of a PLC. So you sort of done the career trajectory a lot, and a massive exit that a lot of people would dream of. Tell us some of the secrets to that success, Jay.
Oh, I'm not sure there are any secrets, but no, I did have the luck, and I suppose also the attitude to just working with entrepreneurs. So about 20 odd years ago, left my job in M&A at Warburg's in the city to take a plunge and join a few individuals, a chap called Tom Teichman, who's pretty well known in the venture circles in the UK. And we set up a fund. So that was 20 odd years ago, back in early stage seed businesses in 1999. So we rode the initial dot-com boom and bust, but we stuck with it and made a success of it. IMI was a business we'd invested in 2000, and the two founders, Vish and Bat, had a vision then of creating intellectual property businesses out of India. So 20 years ago, and even now, arbitrage in labor is done out of lots of places and is probably a relatively straightforward business. But what really caught our imagination was working with entrepreneurs who wanted to create IP and harness Indian engineering talent and exploit that IP globally. So we'd invested in about 2000, 2001. First few years were crazy. As always, businesses nearly go bust. But from about 2004-5 onwards, we've had a steady trajectory. The business grew, and it essentially provides software, cloud software, to large enterprises for them to communicate with their customers. Business grew quite well for the first 7 or 8 years. Along comes the iPhone and smartphones, and virtually every industry is changed by smartphones, and we got involved in what's called enterprise customer communication. And when we were looking for further capital and growth and an exit for early investors, that's really when I got involved. From a day a month to a day a week to 2 days a week to 7 days a week. When Vish wanted to hand the reins over, I was somebody who he handed them over to. And over the last 7 or 8 years, we've grown the business through acquisition and organically pretty well, to the eventual sale to Cisco. So and along the way, we used the AIM market and the London Stock Exchange to actually do it.
Yeah, well, now let me unpick some of those things, because I do want to talk about, if we take in chronological order, I do want to talk about, and we'll get to how you migrated from AIM to being sufficiently big that a Cisco picks you off. Because as we know, there's a lot of AIM companies which never go anywhere other than stay on AIM, and they don't grow. So we'll come to that. So let me get this first part right. You were a venture capital investor in there first, is that right?
Yes,
you were sitting on the board and then asked to come out. So first of all, I want to ask you, how did you get into venture capital? But a lot of people watching this thinking, well, actually, that's an industry I'm interested in, particularly tech VC. How do you get into that? What advice would you give people wanting to get into that? And then the managerial experience, of course, is very different. It's one thing to be an investor,
Sure.
But it's very different, of course, to be a CEO. And how did you learn to get that right? And not just get it right. I mean, look, I'm not saying this to flatter you. I came across the company independently of us knowing each other, and it had come on my radar because of the phenomenal cash flows, the revenue growth. And it was one of my picks for my audience over a year ago. And thank you very much for the returns you've given them. They've done rather well, which made me look good. But the point is, independently of that, you were doing a good job. I can tell that from the numbers. So where did you learn those skills? So first of all, how did you get into VC? And then how did you learn the skills of being a CEO?
Getting into VC was, I think like any entrepreneurial venture, I mean, your own and any venture, you had to take a risk. And I was 30 years old, single, and working in a big bank, working the 70 or 80 or 90 hours that you hear the analysts working nowadays. And I'd done it for a while, enjoyed it a bit, but really wasn't cut out, I think, to be so much on the advisory side. And I think that when I started looking at doing something entrepreneurial, it was, the period was the dot-com boom, and I really wanted to get involved in that, and I was prepared to leave a very high-flying job and take a fraction of my salary to help start a business and a fund. And we, in those early days, Tom and the team had invested in lastminute.com, and so we had a bit of momentum, and we grew the funds, and it was just taking the risk. And I've got a bit of a financial background, so that helped, essentially, obviously, filter companies and understand balance sheets and P&Ls and things. And I also wanted to be in technology, so I think it was desire plus taking a risk and just jumping into it. The transition to management, I think, is a much more interesting thing that I suspect a lot of people do it the other way around. They're essentially very successful entrepreneurs, and then they become investors. I'd been an investor, sitting on lots of boards, lots of experience, had been involved in, I suppose, cleaning up quite a few situations, as well as investing, for growth. And I think I ultimately just got lucky, I would say. And the luck was that I was working with an entrepreneur like Vish, who's a proper manager, and he had spoken about planting seeds and growing gardens, and essentially how the nature of entrepreneurship, and how much of it is about being like a farmer. And I think with me, he just gave me an offer to say, look, I can broadly, please come and do this, and I will sit alongside you for the first few years. And he told me very clearly that he wasn't looking to hand over because he could not do the job anymore, but because he wanted to be a responsible custodian of a business. And he saw a way to train me on the job as such, and hand over then once he felt I could run the business. So I spent, probably a year or two working alongside somebody who I thought was a very good manager, and learning the job. And I think that's how I got into it. And it was a bit of a shock. I think if anybody in investment world or other worlds think they work hard, it's not the same as running a business. And the relentlessness you need to have to run any entity of any size, I think, is something which only comes by doing. And I got very much involved. And I said I was lucky that I met the right mentor. And mentors are critical for making transitions, and I think that's really what helped me. And once I got into it, I think I had a great team of people that also made it much easier.
Yeah, well, there's several things that you said there which are critical. I mean, you mentioned luck, and of course there's skill, but I think it's often overlooked, the element of right place, right time. But of course, you had the abilities and the traits and the skills to put yourself in a position where you were going to get lucky because you were, you were good enough that they would pick you. Mentors, like I said, I mentioned Ty already, and people often ask, how do I get a mentor? Well, it's a case of reaching out very often.
It is.
And as I say, I know Vish, independently of knowing you, it was purely coincidental. And you're right, he's an exceptional individual. I guess getting that right mentor as well. What did you find in terms of technology in the UK you've been part of for so long? Now, as you know, I work with the Department for International Trade. We have this global entrepreneur program where we look to attract technology companies from around the world, outstanding technology companies from around the world. And thankfully, yours was already here, but it's companies like yours which are a lightning rod to attract others to Britain. And we've just seen the UK's largest ever IPO last week. As well. Well, a UK company that had IPO'd in the States, but still a British company in terms of arrival. So what do you see exciting about the UK tech space, given you've been in it right from, this renaissance in the the late 90s?
I think you've got to look at the UK from the sort of fundamentals of things like the rule of law and the business environment. We have a pretty straightforward business environment. You can set up companies very quickly. There are set rules that don't change, so you know what the rules are. Labor laws are pretty flexible, to a certain size. Raising money, raising capital. We've got the best venture capital market outside of the US. So there's a lot of things going for the UK, and I would characterize that the UK to build a business up to probably about $1 billion is probably as good as any place outside of the US. I think it's pretty difficult to rival Silicon Valley, but to be fair, the costs of doing business there have gone through the roof, as everyone knows, and people are moving out. So I do think London and the UK in general, said you can start businesses, you can employ people, you can raise capital. It's a great place for ideas. We've got great scientists, great universities. I mean, it's a great environment in which to start businesses. I think that the key question, one of the questions I suppose, is really, can you really scale to the multi-billion-dollar businesses that you've seen in the US? And I think you're seeing examples with companies like UiPath in Europe. And a few others that have TransferWise, and there's a lot of businesses that now are coming through and being able to scale globally. I think the UK should be the non-US home, or at least the European home for those businesses. I'm not necessarily convinced that we have a problem as such. I think the work that you've been doing, the work that all the seed investors do, the EIS scheme in the UK, so government policy, the AIM market, the London Stock Exchange. I mean, working in unison to create the environment, I think, is needed and necessary, and I think we have it. So, I'd more than recommend any international entrepreneur to set up a base here, to seek to employ people in the UK, raise capital. And it can be the springboard for global success. I think there are clearly some drawbacks with, I think the addressable market issue probably is the single thing that the US has going for it, which is one massive addressable market in one place, English speaking. But outside of that, the rest of it, I think we're on a par.
Well, you're proof of it, because you've gone from start all the way up to huge exit as well, which then sorry, go on.
And actually, I was going to say, for years, I think there's been something around people concerned about exiting a name business to a big trade buyer. And I've been in the M&A markets. I've worked investing in businesses, selling businesses, and I would say I've had that thought as well as to whether or not we would be able, from AIM, to go into a big global tech giant. I always knew structurally that wasn't a problem, but perception-wise. But I would say that actually, I think if you are good enough, and our big breakthrough was growing the business internationally, and then going to the US and putting some feet on the street in the US, winning some customers in the US.
Yeah.
And therefore attracted interest. Where we were located, where we were listed, was really a broadly secondary concern to the fact that we were operationally and technically successful in a really large market.
Yeah. How did you find that US market entry from the UK? Because obviously that's sometimes a concern for companies that, well, should we be over there or over here?
It helps that I've been on the boards of businesses that have failed before. Right. So the fact that it's not the first time I've had to think about doing it and how to do it, I think meant that I was probably a bit smarter and probably a bit less gung ho. The US is not one market. The US is multiple markets, superbly competitive, but also, an opportunity, right? So I think that one thing I would say is there's definitely some hesitancy in the institutional shareholders for sure around US expansion, and in general, I can feel we do get concerned about it as Brits go into the US. But at the same time, I do think if you just do the basics right, particularly around managing your ambition, just do what you would do in any other. You start slowly, understand the market. So we probably spent a year, maybe even 18 months, with a team of 6 initially, just really iterating, trying, and then we grew, and then we bought some businesses, and then we kind of thought, actually, we really understand this market. And probably by the time the pandemic hit last year, I probably would have said, right, we've got to go big. And I had enough confidence to make a case for going big ourselves.
And did you hire locally to understand that market, or did you take your team from here?
I definitely had lieutenants from the UK who were our main people on the ground. And obviously we hired locally, but I think there's nothing to get away from the fact that you need your main people to give you that first insight. And I would say placing, Brits who want to, people who, your salespeople who want to be in another place, they'll work out the country faster than you work out how to read different Americans.
Right. So you relocated a few of those people over there. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. And even now, I've got people over there, who are people who've worked in IMI for 10 years, 12 years, who are happy to relocate and just and they've had great career opportunity, but it's also meant that people who you already have an affinity with and trust their judgment are your eyes and ears on the ground.
Yeah. Well, there's two things there. One is, I feel that after all these years of speaking to Vish and emailing back and forth because we'd lost contact, I've been calling the company by the wrong name. And Vish is too classy to have ever corrected me, because I kept saying IMI, as in the Italian bank.
You call it IMI, it doesn't matter. Now call it Cisco, so it's fine.
Well, now call it, part of Cisco. Tell me what the next step is. What are you going to do? Are you going to, are you looking for the next venture? Are you going to become an investor? Are you going to handhold Cisco in this?
I think there's a real thing that's probably not spoken about enough in entrepreneurship, and that's about responsibility. And I think Vish handing over to me in a very careful, multi-period way was taking responsibility for the ownership of a business, its people, its customers, and I have the same. So I look at it and think, okay, there's a change of shareholder, but ultimately I want, and I think our technology stack and our people, we can be world beaters in our sector, and I think that Cisco's got great distribution, great customers. We fit really well in and with their contact center offering. So we've got a real chance to be a technology leader in the US market in what we do. I think we're already that in some of our other markets. And I want to see that out and make sure that the business and the software and the IP we've created endures.
Yeah.
How I do that, the structures and all that kind of stuff, we'll work it out. But the real aim for me, objective for me, is to make sure that all the work we've done is a success, and that's what I'll be doing, and helping Cisco do it.
Well, like I alluded to earlier, I have this spreadsheet of all 9,000 UK and US listed equities, and yours was amongst the top, I think it's about 150 who hit the valuation, growth, income, cash flow.
You're undervalued. That's the problem.
I'm afraid so. No, on a serious note, that's why I told my investors, I said, right, this is one, because it was undervalued. And therefore, I wasn't surprised when Cisco came along. I got a ping about, what was it, on Friday or Thursday, Cisco's hit a 1-year high, by the way. So trust me, people are looking and drilling down, I'm sure, at their acquisitions as well. Yeah, they're a 52-week high. I don't know how the whole acquisition, whether it was cash or cash and stock, but if it was cash and stock, you're in a good place, because I continue liking Cisco even more so now. So right, that's the future ambitions. I want to wrap up with just give you the opportunity. Anything else, if we're talking about, if you're talking to entrepreneurs from around the world or in the UK, this notion of secrets, the lesser known stuff, or you might even want to repeat to emphasize the things that we all know, but perhaps we just need reminding in terms of achieving success, because you've got that expertise and experience now.
I think, look, it's cliched, but again, focusing on creating real value, and I think that's one of the things that in this current age where capital is pretty free. At times, I do wonder whether there's the emphasis on creating value, and actually, ultimately, that does lead to a thing called profits and cash that matter. And I think entrepreneurs that do that well and focus on it will find that there is success that sustains. I had a great podcast yesterday with the founder of a company called Atlassian, which for the first 10 years had bootstrapped themselves and now is a $50 billion organization. Right. Great success story. And I thought, that really, they built it carefully over many years. Now, I think that, we've got a great environment in the UK in which to do it, environment in which to create capital, to raise capital. So focus on creating value, exits, and the rest of it will look after themselves, and creating value through, as always, great people. I don't think there's any secrets to that, but I do think those things sometimes get forgotten in all the noise.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that probably is the secret, that get rid of the noise and go back to the first principles, the core principles, which you've clearly stuck to, and it's particularly, and I've seen this quite a few of my friends, and I'm going to add you to that list, over the last 20 years, from the ones that we met, yes, in the founding days of time when we all sat around those tables and those events. We've got Fisker Automotive, Geeta, one of our charter members. Now they've just done their SPAC at 2 billion.
Wow.
Part of our sort of cohort, Asif and Powerboats, yeah. And Anand Berman, they exited out of Dabba, and I don't know how many billions that ended up being. And of course, through all of this, it's not the cash part. That, of course, that's one measure of success, but it's something you mentioned earlier with Vish, that notion of custodianship, of responsibility. And of course, the cash will then take care of itself. And I think that ethical element of it, that morality, and I know Vish well enough to know your description, really rings true, because there is that element. I mean, throughout all my conversations with him, it had been that element of developing the business, and it's clear from what you're saying,
and ultimately developing people. I think one of the things that if I look back now and I look at what I'm actually going to be pretty proud of is the number of people's careers that you've kind of brought along, and that they've obviously it's great to have success as well with it, but how much they've learned during the period also is something that I'm sure they'll at some point thank me for.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Jay, and very excited to have reconnected, but also to continue following the successes you are going to have here on forward as well. So thanks for taking the time for this. I know Department for International Trade will be delighted to have yet another successful tech company out of the UK. So thank you on behalf of my colleagues there as well. And we're going to make sure that we promote this far and wide as well. Great. Jay, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Great. Cheers.